Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Needed Conversations. This is Ryan and Victoria Cole here. We're excited about today in particular because it's going to be a collaborative conversation with another marriage ministry, and we're going to get into those details in just a few minutes. But if you've been listening here recently, you know that we're in a series called As For Me and My House, which is all about bringing divine alignment to the home, starting with marriages and then parenting the next generation, and finally to the ripple effects of positive change that each of us should be making in the world for the sake of Christ. Of course, all of this starts with a Christ-centered approach to marriage.
Yes, we've covered several topics already, including having a strong spiritual foundation, learning to properly balance your career and calling with your family life, and building healthy family rhythms. And today we're excited to discuss how you can cultivate friendship and adventure with your spouse that will ultimately lead to a more fulfilling and satisfying life.
But we're not alone today, as we said at the beginning. We have some very special guests that we have connected with on Instagram, actually. And let me tell you, they are killing it with some hilarious reels, but they're also challenging us with some hard-hitting truths about marriage. We're talking about Chris and Jamie Bailey. We're getting ready to bring them on. They're professional counselors and marriage coaches who are passionate about helping couples live their best lives together. They're founders of Expedition Marriage, and they've combined their educational background, masters in counseling, with a biblical worldview to help couples navigate the journey of marriage. I want you to give us a Needed Conversations welcome to Chris and Jamie. Welcome to the show.
Welcome.
Chris and Jamie, we're so glad to have you on the podcast. We want to first get to know you guys a little bit. How did you meet, and how long have you been married?
Well, we've been married about 28 years, been together for over 30 years, May. And we actually met in a karaoke bar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. He was singing Billy Joel, and I was here for it.
A little honesty.
Do you remember the song?
Yeah, it was Honesty. I think it was Honesty.
Yeah, it was Honesty.
Oh, Honesty. Oh, nice. Of course, that I've read before that you guys were unsaved before you got married. So
yes, and in fact, when we met, neither one of us were believers. Mm-mm. And I was coming out of a domestic violent marriage. Mm-hmm. And so I was not looking to meet anybody. And I had a little daughter. And, here we were hanging out in a karaoke bar. Not me and my daughter. So she was with my parents. But, a new relationship was the last thing on my mind. And when I met him, we hit it off instantly. Sure, and, not being believers, we really did 100% of everything wrong.
Oh, yeah.
So we met in the end of May, and by September, we were living together.
Mm-hmm. Not recommended.
Yeah, no, we don't recommend doing that. Like, all the odds were stacked against us. Everything you're told not to do. We were doing it. And so we moved in together in September, got married a few years later, and had some children and 2 more children. So we have 3 daughters now. And it wouldn't be till years later, when we were about 28 and 29, that we came to know Christ. And that's when everything in our marriage changed.
Mm-hmm. Also, about your children, I know you said that you had a daughter when you got married. So you brought a child into the marriage. What about your next children that you had? Like, how did that change your parenting, like before Christ and then after Christ?
Woo! Yeah, it was a big difference. I would say this question relates more to me than it does to him, because he was always the patient one and the calmer one, even without Jesus. The reason why he was more patient maybe have changed. But for me, I was much more of a frantic, hot-headed mom. I was the mom who was constantly yelling and constantly driven by anxiety and just I needed Chris to be perfect. I needed the kids to be perfect. I needed the house to be perfect. Everything always needed to be aligned. And of course, you're a mom. It doesn't work that way. No. Kids do not get on board with that agenda. And so, before Jesus in parenting, it's how we look matters. how people perceive us is what matters most. But after Jesus, that's not what matters most. Shaping their character, teaching them, modeling for them a healthy marriage, modeling for them. We have 3 daughters. It was a lot going to fall on me as to what kind of women they grew up and became, because I'm the same-sex parents is who they're looking to the most. And so who I was before with all that anxiety and yelling and perfectionism versus after, it's like, it's okay. I'm enough as a mom. I just need Jesus to guide me through parenting. And that's it.
Yeah. Were you guys screamers before?
I wasn't.
I was.
well, that was a way of me just throwing you right under the bus. No, not usually. I was certainly a chaser. Jamie would have enough. She would, say that, like, I'm done with this, and then she would try to run away, and then I'd be like outside the bathroom door, come on, honey, let's finish this, fix this, and that kind of that. Yeah, that
we actually had an incident where sometimes I would physically leave. Because I had no coping skills, really, hardly any coping skills. And one time I just took off in our minivan, and he was literally holding onto the roof rack while I'm driving down the street. And here we sit today, and it's so funny. And it's such an example of how amazing the Lord is that we can sit here as counselors and helping people with their marriages. And yet our own story is him driving down the street, me driving down the street with him riding on the car in the middle of a fight. And so, they were kind of explosive, but he got desperate, and I would be explosive.
So dealing with anxieties is coming out different ways. Well, and just even circling back to with the kids, there was such a before Christ, after Christ. We were not who we once were, right? And I wanted our kids to know that. I wanted them to grow up with that, so that way they didn't have to have such a dramatic before and after. Learn the lessons that we've learned, that we've experienced, so that way you don't have to go through some of the trials. Be spared from those. And so that's really was probably a biggest change for how I started parenting, was, trying to train up the child the way they should go. I got really into apologetics. And so I really wanted to help instill in them a strong faith that was based on a lot of good reasons why to have your faith, not just because mom and dad say it's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think along the way too, for me at least, I realized I have the opportunity as a parent to do the work for my children. So whatever I wasn't willing to do, whatever I wasn't willing to change, I knew I was handing it over to them, asking them to one day do it. And I wanted to make their life as easy as possible when it comes to following Jesus. And so I looked at myself and I'm like, what do I want to pass down to my kids? And if it was something I didn't want to work or I didn't want to pass down, I got to work. And it was truly difficult. I went through a lot of counseling myself and dealt with my, difficult upbringing and all of that. But it just something registered with me that the work I'm not willing to do is the work I'm going to ask my children to do.
Yeah.
And that was not okay with me.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we've said before, is that your kids don't do what you tell them to do. They do what they see you do. So they're going to copy exactly what you're doing. So I know I grew up in a family. I'm actually one of 12. So I can't imagine how my parents stayed sane with all of them. But I think what my dad really struggled with is that he had, with the limited time, he really wanted us to get in the Word and all that. But it was so forced. It felt like it wasn't something that my dad was doing. And I'm not saying he didn't do it in his quiet time, but it was just constantly forcing instead of let me see you do it. Because it was more effective for me to see when I saw my mom pray or I saw my dad read the Bible, instead of constantly somebody nagging because it's something that you feel like you need to do as well. So that's kind of what we said before with our kids too. They are watching you like hawks, and they are going to copy every single thing that you're doing. Even if you're trying to correct their behavior, they're just going to copy exactly what you're doing. I know for us, that's especially true because we have toddlers, so they're soaking it up like a sponge.
Yeah, they're like a mirror back to you. You're like, oh man, that is totally me, and Lord, I repent. Please help me. And I can relate. I can relate to you. I tend to be a people pleaser too, and when we've had our disagreements, She's the one who goes silent and moves away, which is kind of the opposite of you. I know that you scream, but or you did rather. But she would want to retreat, and I want to find resolve right now. And, you know, I would be the one hanging on the back of the truck, and I have and I've had to tell her because our car now has it has an app that's connected to it, and she just goes and she doesn't tell me where she's at. And I'm like, I just want you to know
that I've been tracking you.
I will track that car, and I will come. Now, I know that when you get saved, you're a new creation in Christ, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the old ways or strategies that you did in marriage changed overnight. When did you realize, like, okay, we're saved, our marriage is not healthy, and we need to do something about it? And what was that change? Did you start going to counseling, or what was that next step for you?
I think it kind of began with me. And I think what the Lord used the most in my life was anxiety. Because I started developing pretty crippling anxiety to where I was no longer leaving my house after we had our children, and it was beyond my control, and I was like living very miserably every day. And that was when I started going to counseling individually. And when I became motivated to change, when I started doing the work, there were things I was helping him. I think I was the catalyst to helping him change by me telling him, I need you to have a backbone with me.
Yeah.
I need you to stand up against me. I'm going to get mad, but I'll get over it.
Yeah. Well, actually, what she said, it was, you know what? You need to let me get mad. It's okay. I'm a big girl. I'll get over it.
Right. Yeah, that's it. And so I needed him to kind of rise to the occasion because it was my plea saying, I need you to help me in this because I am not living as I should be. This is no way the way God wants me to be living. And so it was when I kind of leaned into him and kind of asked him, help be a resource for me, stand up for yourself. And then he ended up reading Boundaries in Marriage by Drs. Cloud and Townsend. Him reading that book drastically changed my life, because he started applying those things. And we never went to counseling as a couple, but we really got into reading marriage books and applying things and taking what I was learning from counseling, individual counseling, and applying them to our marriage. And we've always been, even when we struggled in our marriage, he's always been my best friend.
Oh, yeah.
And I've always been able to talk to him, and I think that's what helped us in our marriage a lot is we've always had, healthy or not, we always communicated. He was always going to know how I felt about things.
Oh, that is true.
Yeah.
Now, at first, she didn't necessarily know how I felt. It wasn't reciprocated because I didn't want to stir the pot. But that's one of those things where, part of the boundaries of marriage, and also learning, as I dug into the word and wanting to please God, right, more than my wife, So then when God's telling me to, let my yes be yes and my no be no, well, then now I'd stop being, saying yes to be a pleaser, and I would actually let my yes be yes or my no be no, being able to tell her no if that was indeed the case, if I needed to do that. I learned the difference between nice and kind. I learned that I needed to be kind because love is kind, and stop being so nice and thinking that she should just be satisfied with my niceness. So there's all these things, and especially this idea of wanting to be before the throne, and God saying, "Well done, good and faithful one." Right? Did you do what I asked you to do? Not what was going on with her. Did you do what I asked you to do when it came to her, to your first ministry? And I'm started having to run that through filter, going, no, I'm not doing such a good job. I need to step it up.
What I love in hearing your responses to all of my questions, neither one of you point the finger to the other one. Your responses, and obviously you guys are coaches, so you know this, but that's where most people automatically go, Now, it sounds like from your personalities that it could have been hard for you to allow him to lead. Maybe you were the more dominant one. Is that correct?
Oh, yes.
How did you reckon with that? Because it sounds like you're a very powerful, dominant woman, which is not a bad thing. But in terms of like the marriage dynamics, allowing your husband to lead can be a struggle. And there are a lot of independent women who they had their own house, their own money, their own everything. And then they get married and they don't have necessarily a space in their heart and lives for their husbands to lead. How would you advise them based on your experience?
Well, what was hard for me is because I am, opinionated and stronger and stuff, but I was that way because I had to be that way. Not necessarily because I wanted to be that way. So I was doing all this leading. I was calling all the shots, running all the plays out of fear more than out of like a natural leadership, quality I had. It was more because
it was going to go wrong or fall apart if not.
Right. Because I didn't have anybody. I wasn't sure I could trust him to be dependable. And so I'll just do it myself. And so it was when I learned how to be vulnerable, and I think that when you're talking about a woman who is strong and independent and all that, which, like you said, those can be great traits, but people like that in general often struggle with vulnerability.
Yes.
And so at the end of the day, I have to trust that this man loves me and that he has my best interest at heart. I have to really sold out believe that he wants what's best for me. And when you can wrap your mind around that, why in the world would I not want him doing that? Why would I not want another advocate in my life, another leader who's going, I've got you. I've got you. That mentality, is something I wanted to have my entire life. And that's what was our biggest struggle and now is our biggest blessing. Was getting him, to lead and now having him lead. And now I get to have this man who I trust fully is in my corner. And he would not let any harm come my way if there were anything at all he could ever do about it. So when you understand what that leadership is and what that protection is, it's God gave me to him. And with the call of, this is my girl, you got to take care of her. That's a big deal. And when I know that my husband knows that, I can sit back. I don't have to lead. He takes my opinion all the time. He comes to me. It's a joint effort over here. But if there's any issue, I'm defaulting to him. And I have absolutely no reason not to, because I know that he's got my back.
Yeah.
And so when you know that, stepping aside, it's not nearly as difficult.
Yeah, I want to tell. She used to tell me things like, "Hey, it's not my fault if you're not going to lead. That's right. It's not my fault if you're not going to step up."
There.
Yeah, well, because it was true. Because I wouldn't, I would withhold opinions or decisions or things like that. I'm like, well, I wanted to do that. Well, you didn't say it. It's not my fault if you're not going to lead.
That's right.
Or, I knew we shouldn't have done that. It's not my fault if you didn't lead. And I had to be okay with, not with her not necessarily being okay with me in the moment if I knew I was doing the best thing I thought for her and with the family.
And I've learned too that our wives are this prophetic type of voice in a sense, because they're likened to the Holy Spirit. They're great in counseling. God gives them wisdom, and we should take that to heart as husbands, as we're making. I know that we're the head and we go first, and ultimately the blunt force of every decision falls upon us. But they are right there with us, helping to guide those decisions and bringing their perspective. We don't need to have the same perspective. We need to bring our unique perspectives, and that strengthens our resolve,
Yeah, I think when people think about the word submission, and we've talked about it many times, is most people run away from it, especially I'm from a different culture. I'm from Ukraine, so there's definitely a lot of dominance, especially in my parents' age, not so much like our generation. But when you say the word submission, I mean, there's this I ain't doing it. You want me to submit to this person? I don't think so. I don't even respect this person. But, if you break it down, it's really sub and mission. You're under mission. So nobody's ever over anybody. I think we just took this word and defined it for ourselves. And now it's well, no, I'm, more important than you, and whatever I say goes. But I feel like they're missing out on the opportunity to work collaboratively. And like Ryan said, what your wife may see, you may not see. And that's kind of
together we're under the
and
same
then we're
mission.
Also under the same mission. We're submitted to Christ, and that's why having that Christ-centered relationship is so important, because you're not like a leech. You're not trying to suck the life out of your spouse, but you're really getting filled up by God so that you're able to pour into your spouse. So that's very important. But that's kind of like the common thread that we saw. I mean, I know we haven't had a lot of conversation with you guys, but just watching your reels, I think, and even with your conversations, we're just hearing a lot of like friendship, that you've always had this friendship regardless of your challenges that you've had. And I think when we counsel couples, that's like probably one of the biggest issues is like, it's interesting because when you're dating, you have this friendship and you adore this person and you have this respect and you want to do what they do. And then you get married and somehow you no longer want to do what they want to do. And I feel like that then they lose this respect and they don't even want to have a conversation together at all. And so then it's like pointing fingers at one another. So yeah, friendship is very important.
You become roommates.
Yeah.
You get busy, or what we find with a lot of couples is that you jump into the parenting aspect and almost put your marriage on the altar for the sake of being this quote unquote present parent, which, you know, that's a good thing to endeavor to do. But if that means like you're completely forsaking cultivating a friendship with your spouse, you're not doing your children any favors. So I guess as people look at you, and we can go on your Instagram and see this loving, kind friendship between you both. I'm sure you've had times that weren't as friendly. How do you maintain that friendship?
Hey, Robin, I just wanted to share real fast so that you could answer that question. Because we were just spending Memorial Day weekend with some friends. We do that every year. And there's a couple times where we had like little disagreements about something. And, you know, it was like all of 30 seconds. And then we were resolved and all that. Because that's one thing we joke about people. It's like with people, no, we do still have disagreements and all that. We just get through it faster. We just circle back faster. We're different people, have different ways of looking at things and different values of things. And so, yeah, there's still going to be these times. But our friend who was there at her house, she kept looking at it. Every time we would have like, you know, the tone would change. She would just stare at us and just watch us intently. She's like, I want to have like a camera so we can have like a behind the scenes look. You know, but it's like, but
it's over as fast as it begins.
Right, you wouldn't even be able to pull the camera out.
Yeah.
So yeah, we still have those times, you know, and it's learning to get through those without taking them personally, I guess.
Yeah, and I think when you have a friendship, you heal and recover faster.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, we repair our friendships a lot faster than we do kind of our spouse if we don't have that friendship connection, you know, there.
Yeah,
and
I'm mad at you. You should know better.
That's right. That's right. We don't say that, you know, we don't have the same expectations on our friends as we do on one another as spouses. But I think, Ryan, a lot of it is what you were talking about. It's kind of that slow fade that happens.
Yeah.
It's not usually this big incident that happened that breaks that up. It's that you go from dating and it being us as a couple, then to us being mom and dad. We're still doing that together. Then life gets busy, and now we're business partners.
Yeah, we're taxi drivers. We're, you know,
right,
errand runners.
It's who's picking up the kids, where are we going, what are you making for dinner, who's running the errands, and you forget that you need to have the investment, intentional investment in quality time together, because all of those other things are going to drain your resources.
Yeah.
And unless you're intentional about, you know what, we're going to sit on the porch every night and drink a cup of coffee and talk about our friendship and just talk about things that will bond us as friends. If we're not intentionally doing that, you can even go on family walks, because that's something big we would do. Everybody's going out. Kids are walking ahead of us. We're back here holding hands and we're talking. And so you have to make that time to communicate more than just about the business of life, because you start interacting differently when your whole life is just about running the family, running the home, you know, instead of running our marriage. Because the best thing, and I don't think a lot of parents realize this, one of the best things, the best gifts you can give your children is a healthy marriage, is loving one another well.
Modeling that. It makes them feel secure.
Right.
And we just, actually, I just heard the other day that as far as just give your marriage 1% a week. Give yourself 1% a week. That's almost 90 minutes. Or actually, it's almost 2 hours. So yeah, if you just look at that, well, okay, if we could just dedicate 1% of every week to our marriage, that's almost 2 hours that we could dedicate, and it really can make a huge difference.
Yeah, we certainly give to social media more than that. We give to our work. We give to so many things, and they're not all impacting our lives in positive ways. And the number one surveyed answer for couples who have been together, these are generally elderly couples, been together 50 years and on, what is your number one advice? What has made your marriage successful? Almost always the answer is friendship.
Yeah.
They're my best friend. Like friendship is a bonding agent in your marriage, and friendship is what helps you deal with it. It helps you pivot better.
Yeah.
Because, in your married life and seasons and having toddlers and having teenagers and empty nesting, it changes.
There will be a constant change.
There will be. And you will pivot a lot better with somebody who you can talk with. Somebody who you can laugh with. And the more friendship you have, the less stress you're going to have. Him being my best friend and us being able to laugh a lot, that helps us deal with the hard things. Yeah. It helps him become a resource, and we're a resource for one another when it's hard.
I was just thinking, it's laughing's better than crying, right?
That's true.
Either gonna laugh or cry.
I was just sitting here thinking about my parents and even times that we've had that have been rough in our life. We've experienced loss or unexpected challenges, and we just have to look at one another, and I'll crack a joke and be like, hey, we're in it.
It is what it is.
We've hit rock bottom, but you know what? We'll rise again. But you know what we're not going to lose is us. We're not going to lose laughter. And hey, if we lose it all and we end up in a cardboard box on the side of the street, as long as I'm laying next to you and you're keeping me warm and I'm keeping you warm and we're making each other laugh and we can build a vision forward, hey, that's all we need. Not that we want that. Awesome. Nobody's striving for that.
But it's the one thing life can't steal from you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Your joy cannot be stolen.
No, a friend loves at all times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I heard somebody say recently, giving advice for single people, is that marry someone who you can suffer with. And I thought that was pretty profound. One of the things we tell single people is like, when you're considering marrying someone, ask yourself, can I bear the weight of the thorn in their flesh? Meaning the personal struggle that they have. And also, can I bear the weight of their calling? And that may be professional, ministry, whatever. And if you can say yes to those two things, then you guys can do anything together. And that's too what I think what we're saying here with friendship is that is that bonding agent that makes you sort of unstoppable, because the fact of the matter is life does happen. No matter, how privileged we are and the good things that we experience, we will experience heartache, offense, broken times, but it's that friendship that will help us to overcome more easily, Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things I wanted to bring up, and I'm not sure if you guys want to comment on it, but it's the number one trending topic right now. And it's outpaced any other viral moment in recent history, which is the Johnny Depp and the Amber Heard divorce trial, or the defamation trial, because of their divorce. And I think a lot of people sat back and saw entertainment in that, or for whatever reason they were advocating for one side or the other. But a lot of people looked at that evidence and heard a toxic marriage and related to it. And maybe their marriage didn't get violent, didn't move to that extreme, but they can definitely relate to the toxicity there and the bitterness and the resentment and the unforgiveness. And they may be listening to this podcast and they relate more to that toxic marriage than even looking at us and say, oh, those people, they've got it all together, or they have this, wonderful friendship. I can't even fathom being that kind of friend to my spouse. What advice would you give them? How can they move from toxic to healthy friendship?
I think the number one thing they need to do, which is kind of where this all started, in this conversation, is quit pointing the fingers. Yeah.
Mm.
Look, we get so focused on what our spouse is doing wrong, and all the things they're doing and how they're violating us. And it's that me, make me happy, do this for me, or why are you doing this to me? And we rarely just point that finger back at us and go, what am I contributing? What am I bringing to this? And for some people, even if what they're learning as they look at themselves is, wow, like he could have looked at himself and went, wow, I have no boundaries. I'm allowing a lot of things that I don't like in my life from my wife. I'm allowing her to speak to me in ways that aren't okay. And I'm just rolling over allowing it. And so
being resentful.
And being resentful, that's right. But, our biggest opportunity for changing is changing ourselves. And when you start working on yourself, by default, you're changing the dance steps you have going on in your marriage. And so you are forcing your partner to move or shift in some way when you start changing it up on them. But that is where we have the biggest power in our marriage, is where we change ourselves and where we take ownership. If we hear so many times in our counseling practice, well, I only yell at you because you do this, or if you wouldn't talk to me, or if you would listen, I wouldn't have to yell. And so many couples give their power away to their spouse. Yep. And it's like, well, I only do this because you keep pushing my buttons. When never once do we realize we have the power switch to whether those buttons turn on or off.
Right.
And so we're in a powerless position if I'm held captive to only reacting based off of what he does or doesn't do. I've given him all of my power. And there's never going to be any change in there. I'm completely dependent upon him getting better. And all I'm going to do is be desperate for him to change so I can.
Right. And desperation actually can look like a lot of things other than being desperate. It can look like control. It can look like almost violence.
Right.
Where someone's blocking somebody's exit from a room. Or or laying hands on out of desperation. Not to say there's not those things are always out of desperation, but it can happen because there's that freaking out. Like, no, you can't leave till we resolve this, or else everything will fall apart. And I'm going to keep you from leaving a room.
I'm going to jump on the van.
Yeah. Well, if you're on the other side of that, that doesn't look loving at all.
No,
it doesn't look like you're scared or
it's something you want to run from. But that desperation comes in when it's like, I just need you to change so we can be happy, so I can be okay. That's a lie.
Oh, yeah.
That's a lie. You need to take responsibility for yourself, and you start being a good friend. You start loving your spouse well, regardless of what they're doing. And now we're not talking about condoning abusive relationships and all that.
Absolutely not. Yes.
But it's more like, let me be the person who, whether or not they deserve me to treat them that way or not, let me love them well, because our relationship, it started with that vertical. Yeah. God, how do you want me to treat my spouse?
Right.
And not what we want to do is go, he should be treating me like this. And so we've got to flip that script and go, take ownership. How does the Lord call me to treat them? And change that game, because that's where change happens at.
Yeah, we didn't deserve the love that that's lavished upon us from Christ. We didn't deserve his sacrifice. We didn't deserve the grace, the forgiveness, anything like that.
So he gave it anyway.
Yeah, he gave it anyway. So who are we to try to withhold those things from our spouse? Who are we to not to be a conduit from that if we're trying to please God? And it goes back to what I said earlier. It hit earlier in the relationship after coming to Christ. What does God ask of me? Not when my spouse is lovable. Not when he says, I want you. A new command I give you, to love everyone as I have loved you. Well, that just start at home. Just start with your primary ministry first. Am I doing that? Am I living that out? And am I doing it? We have an episode in our podcast, Sowing and Reaping. We weren't always like this. Like you said, we weren't believers. We had fights. I'm on the side of a car going down a road. It wasn't pleasant. So if you have these things where you in a situation where people think that it's hopeless, that's a lie, because there is hope. There is we want to people see our joy because we want them to know that it's possible, that God wants them to have joy in their marriage. It's the joy of the Lord is our strength. There's neuroscience. I love it when science catches up with the Bible. Has found this place in our brain that's considered the joy bucket that has an unlimited capacity for joy. So and it's also tied to our relationship. So the more joy we have, the stronger our relationships are. So it's really how it all starts to tie together is almost miraculous. Oh, go figure. But it is sad that people do relate or do see themselves into that situation, that they've let things go so far that that's how they imagine their own relationships, because that's not why they got married. When they're, we're dating, they're thinking, oh, I can't wait until we're always at each other's throat and every conversation becomes an argument and we want to sleep in separate rooms.
And I think what makes that public situation different is that when it comes to abuse, which obviously if you're in an abusive relationship, you need to seek help and you need to get out of that. We wouldn't want you to stay in an unsafe situation, you or your children. However, in this situation, it looked like both people were contributors to the aggression in the relationship. And I have personally encountered, even people in my family and a little bit in my parents as well, sort of this back and forth antagonistic relationship. And so you really have to learn to take personal responsibility for yourself, for your relationship with God. And when you change, everything around you will begin to adjust to accommodate the change that you make. And it's a surprising phenomenon that takes place, especially when it's mutual like that. The fastest way to a person's heart is to serve them.
Yes.
And if you've got this kind of aggression in the relationship or this animosity towards one another, try serving your spouse or asking the Lord, how can I care for them or help meet their need and fill up their bucket every single day, no matter if it's not being reciprocated. Because in marriage, that's the difference between a contract and a covenant. Contract is you don't live up to the end of the bargain, I'm just going to walk away. But a covenant is built on mercy and grace. And it says, I'm going to show up no matter if this day, this week, or even this year, I'm not getting back from you. I'm going to get back from Christ what I need, and then pray and believe that God is going to work inside of your heart too, to bring that transformation about, so that then we'll both have this mutual fulfillment in the relationship.
Yeah, I was thinking about that scripture that says it's his loving kindness that leads us to repentance. And I think oftentimes so many couples think, well, I don't want to be the one who's starting first. He needs to start first, and it's like, well, who's going to start,
And we're repaying evil with evil.
Yeah, somebody's going to have to start. And I think when somebody takes ownership and says, well, let me look at myself, because I'm thinking that I'm all this high and mighty and I'm doing all these things right and this person's not doing it right. And then when you really allow God to heal those places of hurt and past issues, past traumas, you really start seeing like, wow, I am actually not a good person at all. And you are now learning that Christ has extended so much love towards you that you should do the same thing. And whenever, like Ryan said, you serve this person, so many times, they will not be able to ignore it. They will not be able to ignore the fact that you are changed. There's something going on internally. It's not just behavioral changes, but actually internally, you just have peace, you have joy, you're really serving them with a full heart. And that's when now it's like, oh, your spouse is now interested. Maybe they want to come to church, or maybe they want to come to a counseling session. So yeah, like you said, taking that personal responsibility for yourself and looking inward, because honestly, marriage is a mirror reflection of who you truly are. Most people think that they'll get married and they can get all this stuff that they need and all their needs fulfilled, but it really is a mirror image of who you are, and it's actually magnified even more so. So if you were this way when you were a single person, you'll start not liking certain things in your spouse, and it's probably more of a problem in you because it's really irking at your soul.
And we're really good at masking that in the dating process, and not letting those true colors show. But then when you get living under the same roof, that starts coming out for sure. But I know you guys are helping couples every single day to restore that connection. Maybe they had it in the beginning, but life got in the middle of their relationship. Tell us about this new course that you have called Restoring Connection and how couples can sign up for it.
Sure.
All right. Well, what it is, it's a 4-week plan, and ultimately it's a plan to reconnect in your marriage using just about 10 minutes a day. And so what it is you'll get, it's for, 4 weeks right in a row. We give 4 different video teaching lessons where we're teaching, communication techniques, we're teaching, biblical truths, and we're giving you questions and opportunities for good conversations that you've probably never had or haven't had in a while. And every week of the plan levels up and gets a little bit deeper. And so you're having fun, you're connecting, and you're doing it in small increments of time in just 4 weeks. And we have heard back from so many couples already taking it, how just that 10 minutes a day has radically transformed their marriage. And so you can find that on our website, which is at expeditionmarriage.org.
Yeah. Actually, I was just talking with one couple. They've been married for 37 years. They started the course, and the wife had told me, she's like, I learned stuff about his youth I never knew.
Wow.
And I've been with this man for over 37 years.
That's crazy.
We always tell couples, you have to enroll in the university of your spouse in every season of life. And I think it's very arrogant for us to think that I know all there is to know about this person. And like you just said, you might find out things that you never knew. And I think it's the adventure of the marriage to keep on searching for more hidden treasure in your spouse.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that you said adventure, because it is an adventure. It's a journey. We keep going. And as long as we're curious, we'll still keep looking for new answers and new things to discover on this adventure. I love that adventure. Yeah.
I love the name of your marriage ministry, Expedition Marriage. Make sure you're following Christian Jamie on Instagram. You won't regret it. Expedition_marriage. Their reels are great, but then also, like we said at the beginning, you're getting some real practical information, strategies for your marriage. And, we're so glad to have been connected with you. You guys are in South Carolina too, right?
We are.
Yes.
Yeah, y'all are in South. Are they in South? I didn't know that.
Yeah, we're in Greenville, South Carolina, right around the corner, not too far from you. Hopefully we'll be able to connect and do something in the future together, since we're kind of in the same territory and all that. But I know we'll stay connected on Instagram. But I want to thank you guys for joining the podcast today. It's been a great conversation. Honey, any other words?
Yeah, we'll be looking forward for the remake of the reel of Jamie driving away and Chris riding on top of the car.
Yeah, that's got to be a reel
Don't
sometime.
tempt us.
But you should write true story.
Yes.
Oh, that's actually a good idea. We might actually do that.
That
Set
would be
up the
funny.
gimbal on sports.
I'm sure some couples would relate.
Any final words from you guys?
No, other than just enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
Just love one another, develop that friendship, and this journey of marriage is meant to be enjoyed.
Yeah, wherever you're at, start now.
Amen. Well, thanks again for listening to Needed Conversations. We'll be back next week with another episode. For all your marriage resources, go to moremostforever.com.